maybe say something. I think that we couldn't survive a second if we weren't able to act. That acting is a survival mechanism, and it's a social unguent, and it's a lubricant.
There are actors, there are stars, and then there was Marlon Brando. He wasn't just a performer. He was a revolution in a leather jacket. With a smoldering intensity and a raw, vulnerable power, he tore down the conventions of acting and rebuilt the craft in his own image. From the primal scream of Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar, named desire to the quiet, dignified authority of Don Corleone in The Godfather, Brando didn't just play characters. He bled them onto the screen. He was a titan, a genius, a force of nature who changed cinema forever. But the same fire that fueled his revolutionary talent also forged a monster. Behind the scenes, the sensitive artist gave way to a tyrannical figure of legendary difficulty. He was known to be arrogant, manipulative, and profoundly unprofessional. For every director who marveled at his genius, there was a co-star left emotionally battered in his wake, vowing to never again step onto a set with the man they considered a brilliant but insufferable tyrant. Today, we're exposing the chaos behind the craft. We are delving into the stories of the people who saw the monster up close. These are the four legendary figures who endured Marlon Brando's on-set torment and vowed to never work with him again. To understand why so many of his colleagues ended up despising him, you have to understand Marlon Brando's philosophy. It was born from a deep, almost pathological, contempt for the Hollywood machine. He saw the polished, rehearsed acting of the studio era as phony, a sterile imitation of life. He championed a new, raw style known as the method, where the actor was meant to find a deep psychological truth and bring it to the surface no matter the cost. In his early years, this dedication produced some of the most electrifying performances ever captured on film. But as his fame grew and his cynicism deepened, his process began to curdle into something far more toxic. The search for truth became an excuse for laziness. The desire for realism became a license for cruelty. He stopped memorizing lines, claiming it made his performances stale, instead relying on cue cards or hidden earpieces. He saw his co-stars not as collaborators, but as instruments in his own psychological experiments. He would deliberately provoke them, insult them, and ignore them, all in the hope of generating a real emotional reaction he could use on camera. His on-set behavior wasn't just an artistic process. It became a sadistic power play. He was the biggest star in the world, and he knew it. He relished the chaos he could create, knowing that producers and directors were too terrified of his talent to ever truly stand up to him. The man who appeared on screen was a genius. The man who showed up to work was a saboteur. And our first legend found that out when he was forced to share a soundstage with the one man in Hollywood whose ego was as big as his own. Legend number 1. Frank Sinatra, the professional and the provocateur. The 1955 musical Guys and Dolls was destined to be a clash of titans. In one corner you had Frank Sinatra, Old Blue Eyes, the master vocalist, a consummate professional who hit his marks, knew his lines, and expected the same from everyone else. In the other corner you had Marlon Brando, the mumbling revolutionary, the poster boy for the method, who saw Sinatra's slick professionalism as the very definition of phony. Their feud on that set became the stuff of Hollywood legend, a perfect microcosm of the war between old Hollywood discipline and the new wave of rebellious actors. From Brando's perspective, the conflict was an artistic necessity. He had been cast in the lead singing role over Sinatra, a fact he knew infuriated the singer. He saw Sinatra as a pampered Vegas performer, a man who coasted on charm rather than digging for emotional truth. So, Brando decided to make it his personal mission to crack Sinatra's polished facade. He saw it as his duty as a method actor to provoke a genuine raw reaction from his co-star. This provocation took many forms. Brando would constantly halt production to ask the director for motivation, dissecting every line with a theatrical display of confusion. He knew this infuriated the hyper-prepared Sinatra, who just wanted to get the shot done. While Sinatra could nail his musical numbers and dialogue in a single take, Brando would deliberately flub his lines, forcing Sinatra to repeat scenes over and over. The most infamous example of this psychological warfare was the legendary cheesecake scene. Sinatra despised cheesecake. Brando, almost certainly aware of this, turned the scene into an instrument of torture. Take after take, Brando would forget his final line, forcing Sinatra to consume slice after slice of the dessert he hated. From Brando's twisted perspective, this wasn't just a prank. It was an experiment. He was watching Sinatra's famous cool unravel, seeing the flicker of real anger in his eyes, and he considered that truth to be more valuable than his co-star's comfort or the film's schedule. He was stripping away the performance to get to the man, and he didn't care how cruel the process was. The consequence was predictable and absolute. Sinatra, a man who demanded respect above all else, was left with a burning, lifelong hatred for Brando. He saw Brando not as a dedicated artist, but as a lazy, arrogant amateur who hid his lack of discipline behind the trendy excuse of the method. Sinatra left that set vowing to never share a screen with Mumbles again, and he kept that promise for the rest of his life. For Brando, it was just another day at the office, a successful experiment in generating chaos. For Sinatra, it was an unforgivable insult from a man he considered his professional and artistic inferior. Legend number 2, Burt Reynolds, the hero who became a villain. Not everyone who vowed never to work with Marlon Brando did so after months of on-set torment. For some, the decision was made after just a few minutes in his presence. Such was the case for Burt Reynolds, a rising star in the 1970s who, like many actors of his generation, idolized Marlon Brando. For Reynolds, Brando was more than an actor. He was a hero, the very reason he had pursued a career in film. But a single crushing encounter on a television talk show was enough to shatter that illusion forever. The scene was the Merv Griffin show. Burt Reynolds was a guest, and to his utter delight, he learned that his idol, Marlon Brando, would also be appearing. Reynolds was on top of the world. He was finally going to meet the man who had inspired him, the greatest actor alive. When Brando came out on stage, Reynolds was effusive, showering him with praise and gushing about how much his work meant to him. He was a fan, meeting his hero, and his admiration was genuine and heartfelt. Brando's response was ice cold. Instead of acknowledging the compliment with grace, he seemed to view Reynolds' admiration with suspicion and contempt. As Reynolds continued to praise him, Brando leaned over and, in a moment of shocking cruelty, delivered a line that would haunt Reynolds for the rest of his life. Looking at Reynolds, he allegedly sniped, "I don't know what you're so happy about, you're just a TV star." The insult was sharp, dismissive, and designed to humiliate. But Brando wasn't done. He then reportedly made a snide remark about Reynolds' toupee, a well-known secret in Hollywood at the time. The audience and the host were left in stunned silence. Reynolds, who had entered the interview with boyish excitement, was utterly crushed. He later described the moment as devastating. The man he had put on a pedestal had gone out of his way to be cruel for no reason other than, it seemed, his own amusement. The experience was a brutal lesson. The hero Reynolds had admired from afar was, up close, a petty and unkind man. The consequence of that brief, toxic encounter was that Burt Reynolds made a preemptive vow. He later recounted that over the years, opportunities arose to work with Marlon Brando, the kind of projects he would have once dreamed of, but he turned every single one of them down. "I never wanted to meet my hero again," he stated flatly. He had learned his lesson. The genius on the screen was inseparable from the bully on the talk show couch. For Reynolds, the risk of enduring that kind of casual cruelty on a daily basis for a film shoot was simply not worth it. Brando's behavior had been so needlessly hurtful that it had extinguished a lifetime of admiration and replaced it with a firm resolve. He would honor the artist's work from a distance, but he would never again make the mistake of getting close to the man. Legend number 4, Frank Oz, the director and the dictator. If Marlon Brando's behavior was difficult in his prime, it was borderline tyrannical in his final years. His work on the 2001 heist film The Score is perhaps the most infamous example of his late career chaos. The film was supposed to be a passing of the torch, pairing the legendary Brando with his acting heirs, Robert De Niro and Edward Norton. But it quickly devolved into a one-man hostage situation, with director Frank Oz as the primary victim. Frank Oz, a celebrated director and the legendary performer behind characters like Miss Piggy and Yoda, was thrilled to have the opportunity to direct his idol. That excitement evaporated almost immediately. From the outset, Brando decided he did not like Oz, and he made it his mission to make the director's life a living hell. The conflict was so intense that Brando refused to be on set at the same time as his director. The production became a logistical nightmare. Brando would only accept direction relayed to him through his co-star Robert De Niro. Oz would have to stand in another room watching on a monitor, giving notes to De Niro, who would then walk back onto the set and deliver them to Brando. It was an absurd and humiliating process, designed to completely strip Oz of his authority. Brando's insults were not just professional, they were deeply personal and cruel. Knowing Oz's history as a puppeteer with the Muppets, Brando would relentlessly mock him, frequently referring to him as Fozzie Bear or Miss Piggy. He would taunt him, saying things like, "I bet you wish I was a puppet so you could make me do what you want." His behavior grew increasingly bizarre. He would refuse to leave his trailer for hours. He once arrived on set with a doctor's note claiming he was allergic to the director. On another occasion, he appeared on camera for a scene completely naked from the waist down, simply to cause chaos and disrupt the shoot. It was a masterclass in psychological torment. For Frank Oz, the experience was agonizing. He was trying to helm a major motion picture while its biggest star was actively sabotaging him at every turn. The consequence was a vow forged in the fires of a truly nightmarish production. Oz has spoken openly about the deep stress and pain the experience caused him. While he maintains a public respect for Brando's iconic performances, he has been unflinchingly honest about the man himself. He described the process as a nightmare and has made it unequivocally clear that he would never, under any circumstances, go through it again. The Score was Marlon Brando's final film, and it served as a grim, fitting capstone to his reputation. A film where his on-set tyranny finally and completely eclipsed his on-screen genius. From the old-school pride of Frank Sinatra, to the shattered admiration of Burt Reynolds, to the classical discipline of Sir John Gielgud, and the directorial authority of Frank Oz, the stories are all different, but they paint one consistent portrait. They tell of a man whose artistic genius was matched only by his capacity for cruelty and chaos. Marlon Brando's method was, in the end, a convenient shield he used to justify his worst impulses, his laziness, his arrogance, and his contempt for anyone who wasn't him. He sought truth on screen, but he often did so by creating a toxic reality for everyone around him. He didn't just want to find the honesty in a scene. He wanted to dominate it, to break his collaborators, to assert his own brilliance, leaving a trail of professional wreckage in his wake. The legacy of Marlon Brando is, therefore, a profound paradox. He is, without question, one of the most important and influential actors in history. But at what cost? Did his on-set chaos truly fuel his undeniable genius? Or did his genius simply give him a lifelong license to be a monster? He changed the art of acting forever. But the stories of those who suffered through his process serve as a dark, cautionary footnote. A timeless reminder that the brightest and most revolutionary fires often cast the longest and most destructive shadows. Do you think Marlon Brando's genius justified his on-set behavior? Or was he simply a brilliant but unprofessional tyrant? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look into Hollywood's past, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Vintage Vault for more incredible stories.